And now we will introduce our final inductee of the class of 23. And I'd like to bring up Ron Edwards and Greg Wall to introduce a longtime coach, very well deserving, Tim Martin.
Notebook paper. Tim called me, I guess, midway through the summer and asked me if I could come and do the introduction speech. It's a little daunting before I get into it to give a speech for outside of my parents. There's probably been nobody that's played a more direct role in my life than Tim Martin. He recruited me to come out wrestling. I remember sitting in that junior high gym and he came and told a speech and I was like, man. And then he taught me how to wrestle. And then later on, he called me up and gave me my first coaching job. And that led to me becoming a teacher and a coach. I'm going into my 30th year coaching, my 24th year teaching. It doesn't take much of a straight edge to draw a direct line between Tim Martin and where I am today. It's a little bit frightening and humbling to have those kind of impacts on me. So Tim did that. As I mentioned, Ron Edwards. Some other people had mentioned me, but I was told you have to tell a funny story about the person. Rick was like, just tell a funny story and move on. So I went through, I have a bunch of stories on Tim, but the one that sticks out most in my head is not Ronnie Edwards, the stud wrestler. That is not the story that I remember about Tim. It was Ronnie Edwards, the brand new freshman who had just broken into the varsity lineup. I was going to wrestle my first varsity match. I was so excited. I'm contributing, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a state champ. This is happening. And I walked out, and we went to Edgewood or Valley View, I forget. And I didn't know, but everybody else on the team seemed to know that this was not going to go my way. It's not going to end the way you think. But I went out on the mat. I didn't know quite yet. And Tim looks at me, and he goes, all right, Ronnie, go out there and do your best. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but that was Tim Martin code for you're about to take a beating that you can't stop. This dude is going to beat you like a drum. He wouldn't tell you that directly. It took about half the year for me to find that out. And I still, like when people say, do your best, I'm like, oh, God. Shiver down your spine. So you're like, that was the coaching. That was the coaching I got on my very first match. Like, how does that do your best guy get into the Hall of Fame? He didn't tell you to, like, hey, do this move or avoid that. It was just do your best. It went exactly the way you might imagine. The way I fresh and drummed. So how does it do your best guy get in the Hall of Fame? So the stats speak for themselves. I mean, you can read it through the book, but 30 years coaching wrestling at Little Miami. 23 as a varsity coach, and 7 as a junior high coach. He started the junior high program at Little Miami back in 1977. We have a junior high program since Tim started. He also started the youth program later on as well. When we finally had a place where we could put mats down, we didn't have to roll them back up and down. That's a long-time coach. And 2-time FABC Coach of the Year. If you don't know what the FABC is, you can look it up. It's an old league. 5-time Western Star Coach of the Year, Cincinnati Coach of the Year, Cincinnati Coach of the Year in '83, won 222 duels. Tim coached the #1 team in the city in 1982, and the number 2 team in the city in '83, '88, and '09, and 11 other ranked teams in the top 10. He coached a state champion, 6 state placers, 22 state qualifiers. And 22 state qualifiers. Let's see what we got here. The Cincinnati Wrestling Year 82 through 84, FABC Wrestling Year 88, 89, 91, 92, 21 sectional champions, 7 district champs, 51 FABC champions. Like, it's impressive just in wrestling what Tim did for the program. Really, for 30 years, for generations of kids, Tim's the face of Goshen wrestling. Like, when you think of Goshen wrestling, there's a long time, people are like, that's the guy, that's the face you see in your head. But he didn't get it off the strength of do your best. that was not what happened. Probably the most important thing Tim said to me happened after I walked off that mat. A very humble young man who realized you weren't going to state this year. And for the life of me, I don't know what Tim said. I do not remember. But I know it was important because I didn't go home and tell my parents, that's it, we're done, pull the plug, it's over. I don't want to do this no more. I didn't shut down, I didn't check out. I went back the next day and I worked on making my best better. Tim had that ability to create those relationships with his athletes where they were willing, they bought into the program. And then they worked hard, we worked hard up in that room. And I worked hard because I didn't want to let my coach down. It was important for me that my best was good enough. And it didn't always come up that way, but you wanted to give your best for Tim. He had not just an individuals, and I'm a little bit of an odd duck. Not everybody's like me. I've learned that as coach, but when you look at his teams, he had the ability to do that across the board with his athletes, to make those kids want to go out and in practice and at the meets do their best. And when their best came up short, they came back the next day and worked at making their best better. That's an impressive thing. Go on too long, we've been here, but that's how you get into the Hall of Fame. That's how you get inducted to the Hall of Fame. So, I'm very proud to get the opportunity to introduce Tim and welcome him to the Little Miami Hall of Fame.
That's a tough act to follow. And it's a common theme tonight from his players and coaches and everything for Coach. I played for Coach from 1990 to 92. He called me and asked me if I could do his introduction with Ronnie, and I was a little bit shocked. I was humbled. I can't tell you what an honor and privilege, Coach, to be up here doing this tonight. I'll start with a few stats because I think they're important to note. And then just talk a little bit about what Coach meant to all of us as players and students. Coach Martin coached football in Little Miami from 1977 to 99. He was a varsity coach from 89 to 99. And in 1992, he was the head coach. Paul went over it, the winningest football team in school history, the state playoffs, first team to win a playoff game, all of that. In that year, he was honored not only as the coach of the year for the league in the FABC, but also in the Western Star, in the district, in the Cincinnati area, and the entire state for Division III schools. He was the coach of the year. And in doing so, he was also selected to be the head coach of the East-West game and the Cincinnati All-Star game. In addition to that, Coach Martin also coached the girls varsity track coach from 1996 to 2006. During that time, the team won 20 trophies, and they set 8 school records. They had 2 district champion relay teams, and of course, a 3-time district champion pole vaulter who's here tonight. To my knowledge, he's the only Little Miami head coach that has multiple teams now in the Hall of Fame, as well as double-digit individual Hall of Fame inductees. And I think that's pretty impressive, and it's fitting that he's represented by 3 inductees tonight that came from all 3 of those sports: football player, wrestler, and track athlete. You know, he accrued many impressive accolades and records over that 35-year career at Little Miami. But Coach's influence went well beyond just his records and his accolades. I'll say a few words, and then I'll give a chance to any other players and coaches here tonight. I want to say a few brief words when I'm done before we introduce Coach. But first, I'd be remiss if I didn't say a quick thank you to Mrs. Martin, and Casey and Ben for sharing Coach with all of us and supporting him and for all your patience through the years. This award is as much about you guys as it is for him. He certainly wouldn't be here today without that support and love from you all. And you know, I also am going to apologize for those of us back in the chief seats for the gray hair at 39. That was all on us, pretty much, the 1992 football team by itself. We were freshmen, Coach's first year as head coach, and our core group of players came up under his watch. You know, we certainly paid our dues along with him. Many of us started both ways that sophomore year through the 2-8 season. But Coach always emphasized hard work, never quitting, come back better. And it began to pay off over time. Like Kevin and John mentioned, you know, we went 4-6 their senior year, our junior year, but those losses were all, you know, really close games, single score losses. We could see where he was taking us, and we believed in his leadership. With Coach, you learned to earn your success, and you earned it the right way. You didn't take shortcuts. There weren't any gray areas. There weren't any substitutes for things like effort, focus, commitment to your team, to your teammates, and to your coaches. And it paid off in that 92 season. And that was a magical year for all of us, but not just because of the records and the accolades. It validated all the things that Coach had preached and modeled to us for so long. And when you're a young kid and you see that kind of payoff for doing things the right way, earning it, those good lessons that you learn stick with you for life. You gain confidence from it. It's something you can draw on when life throws trials and tribulations your way. And it's a very powerful argument for the importance of high school athletics, for developing young people of character. More importantly, it emphasizes just how critical the role coaches and teachers play in young kids' lives. And to all the coaches and teachers in the room, my hat is off. Coach Martin coached with integrity. He instilled the importance of hard work, teamwork, and playing the game with character. He was the best at leading by example and teaching his players all those critical things that enable them to be good, successful young men and women. He's left a very positive mark on thousands of young men and women that were fortunate enough to have him as a coach or a teacher. And if that's not the definition of what we should look for in a high school Hall of Fame coach, I don't know what is. His true legacy isn't the records and it's not the accolades, but it's how his influence positively affected not just this community, but all the communities and organizations across the countries that his players and students went on to make better. The world's truly a better place, Coach, because of your mentorship, your example, and all the hard work and tireless efforts. Coach, it's my honor to play for you, and it was certainly an honor and a pleasure to introduce you tonight. Before I do that, is there anybody else who wants to come up and say a few brief words before Coach comes up? No respite, Coach. You gotta go. Got puts in the game.
Sure, I said do my best.
Thank you. Please welcome Coach Tim Martin.
He's really one of my old ties. Great guy. Let me take a second here. I really want to thank Ronnie and Greg for such a wonderful presentation. I'm going to say a few things about them. Ronnie he had a tough freshman year. He'd been a couple times junior high league champ. His junior year, bought this little driving cap or some silly little hat that had a little brim on it. And he worked all the meets. And well, he didn't lose much after his freshman year. And the kids, we'd be weighing in, you know, you have to weigh in wrestling, and you look around. And I hear the kids say, God, I got that kid in the hat. And they weren't looking forward to a tough 6 minutes on the mat. But, yeah, he's just an outstanding person. He didn't say that he had done a 4-year tour of the Navy before he came back, and I asked him to help assist and worked on his teaching degree. He's coached a couple state champs at Goshen, and he's had quite a career over there. Now Greg, what I'm going to say about him is nothing but positive also. I don't remember what year was it, Sharon? How old were the kids? Well, Greg went to West Point. They got an appointment, and he's graduating from West Point, and he invited our family to the graduation. It was quite an honor for us, and we skipped school for a couple of days, and made the trip. Had a wonderful time there. I appreciate, Greg, you thinking about us. That was just a wonderful time. So if I can get my emotions under control here, I'll be all set. All right. First, I'd like to recognize my family. I'd like to recognize Ben, my son and his wife, Stacy, both teachers in Indiana. Ben was a very good athlete here, earned 8 varsity letters. Like Kevin, he was a multiple-time state qualifier. I think there's been 5. He went twice, ran track for Mr. Runyon, captain of both his sports. My daughter Casey's here with her husband Peter. Casey is also an educator, and Peter's a pilot. And our two beautiful granddaughters there, Elena and Natalie. And you're a grandparent, you can have fun with them, and we love them. Casey was also an athlete here. I think she still holds some tennis records for doubles. And she was a member of the 2 record-setting relay teams here. So we had some athletes in the family. She was also captain of her tennis team and track teams. And finally, I get to my beautiful wife, Sherry. 60 years of coaching. Somebody's got to run the ship at home. And she did a wonderful job. I was gone a lot. I felt like I was a parent to a lot of other kids. But she is the rock of our family. I love her, and I wouldn't have been able to do these things that I've done here with Miami without her. All right. I'm going to skip some things I have here. And I'm kind of like Ron. I wasn't your typical hiree at Miami. I graduated in '71 from high school. My parents, we had little money. So I decided early, I had a wonderful coach, that I was going to be a coach. And when I graduated, like a lot of kids here, I was 17, I couldn't get a decent job. Worked one of the dirtiest jobs in the country, probably. Worked for a chicken company, emptying laying houses where the chickens lay the eggs and putting new bullets in to lay the eggs. I did that for 5 weeks after I graduated, finally turned 18, and I got a job in the only manufacturing place in Putnam County where I grew up. Sylvania, they made TV tubes, and I got a huge raise. I went from 280 to 302 an hour on my salaries. All my friends were in college. I spent the next year and a half saving all my money, and until I had enough saved up where I felt I could get at least through 1 year of college. And luckily, my university accepted me, and I went there. I had 4 great years, graduated, and when you graduate, you put your name in. I went to the educational department, placement, and they put your, well, they tell you when your area of teaching comes up. I was teaching industrial arts, had a phys ed degree, and could have taught driver's ed. Well, all summer, I'm waiting, and I get a Delaware, Ohio, around Columbus. I get a letter, and a call, come on in. I get there, and they wanted me to teach welding and automotive, something I had no qualifications for. Drove all the way to Columbus. So I get back, second week in August, I get a call from Little Miami, Warren County. Where the heck's that at? I mean, even though I'm not over in Miami and Butler County, I'm from Northwest Ohio. And so they tell me how to get here. I come down 27. I've never gone that way now, but cross 275 up Fields Erdel, all this way. The one thing I can say in 77, there was nobody out that way. There was no Fields Erdel Mall or any of that stuff. So it was country, and I enjoyed that. I grew up in the country. So I get here with Mr. Unger, was the high school principal. Had a good interview with him. He said, we'll give you a call back. What they really wanted to do was, the junior high teacher at the time was Mark Watchspay. They wanted to move into the high school and put me in the junior high position. Well, he calls me 2 days later and says, the junior high guy doesn't want to budge. So we're still interviewing. Okay. I was actually working at the Victoria Station restaurant down by the ballpark, and they were going to make me a waiter. The next week, they wanted me to start training to be a waiter. And I got a call on a Friday night, late, that said they wanted me to come back for another interview. So I said, okay, I'll come back. Jim Taylor was the principal at the time. We had a good interview. He was from St. Mary's, Ohio, which is up in northwestern Ohio. And he knew Bob Diller, who was in the Track Hall of Fame, Melissa, in Ohio. He had been our track coach, and he had left for Ayersville. We had a good talk. I said, I think I can coach some other things for you, and we'll call you back. I called back Monday the week school started. And I lived in a house trailer that I bought, kept on campus to save money. I had to move it someplace over here, moved it to Bland, and make a long story short, hey, I got hired, I got in, and school's getting ready to start. You know Ken's old wife, Marge. Marge was our secretary, and this is the last thing I'll say about this. First day of school, I live in Blanchester. I'm pulling out, I got a flat tire in my car. and Randy's here and some people. Marge ran the tightest ship you know. And so she thinks, like, guys, not gonna be worth a hill of beans, what she was thinking. I got here, taught 35 years, loved it. Loved every second of it. Everybody knows I coach football, wrestling, and track. And Paul asked me the other day, which one did you like the best?
Sorry.
I liked them all. Well, that's what I told him. It's not the sports. It's the kids. It's the kids. I love them all, and I don't regret coaching any of them. I'm proud of all the people I worked with, and I'm going to try to name them off here real quick without a paper. So track will be the easiest because I only coached 8 years. But my first Chris Schweitzer, was my first coach I coached with, Sean Derrick, Kevin Rose, and then Melinda Carter coached with me for 4 years. All great people, all great teachers, and those were my track coaches. Now I'm going to go to football because it's the second shortest sport. I started as an assistant for Barry Schott, and Barry and I worked together the entire time he coached here. I was on his staff the entire time. And on that staff was Terry Sheehan, Bob Leahy, and I, and Barry were the staff. Later Bob would leave, and David Eads would come in, and then Randy Gray, Chris Mahalik. Who else? After Chris, I had John Horn was on my staff, Gary Dermott, who's here, Greg Short, Kevin Thornton. Now, you know what? I had these down earlier before I get so choked up. Larry Laird, Jim Cargo, Scott Stiles, Mike Frith. Oh, man. Did I miss anybody, Randy?
Coach Wise.
Oh, Coach Wise, thank you. He was on the 92 staff. Those are all guys that helped me with varsity football, or I coached with as an assistant. All great teachers, all great people. Now wrestling will be a bigger list. The first gentleman I coached under was Larry Bauman. He was the football coach, wrestling coach. We only had about a dozen kids on the team that year. We were riding home from a match, and I was talking, why don't we start a junior high team? That's how the junior high team got started. The person that helped me on the junior high team was Bob Ailing, and he's still a friend of the day, and he actually taught me quite a bit of wrestling. And then I had, when I moved to varsity, I picked off one of the best wrestlers off the varsity team, Pete Agricola, helped me. After Pete, it was Tim Diss, another one of my wrestlers. After Tim, we had a little change up. We had a man named Steve Boone, lived in the community, had wrestled for Loveland, a tremendous help. Rodney Cash, who last year when I was sitting up here, had just passed away. I had to give his eulogy the next day. After those gentlemen, I had a guy named Chaz LaRue. And what's that name sound like, ladies? He was a male dancer. He come in from Dayton Wayne, knew a lot of wrestling. In fact, he's been an official for the last 20 years, officiates the state wrestling meeting. And then Ron Edwards come home from the military, I had Monty. And Gary Dermott, I'm sorry I missed you on the football staff. Now that I see you there. And gosh, who was after Ronnie? Oh, well, after Ronnie, I actually did junior high for a while again. And Dennis Runyon and Don Kelly helped me coach junior high. And came back to the varsity. I had some great guys. Rick Lovins was with me for a while. Jim Florio, Jim Williams, who coaches here, was with me. And the last coach I had with me was one of my wrestlers too, Wade Brown. So had a lot of great guys that coached with me. Some of them were teachers, and some of them just loved kids and loved their sport. A couple other things I'm proud of I did in my career. I made sure the athletes on the teams I coached got some recognition, whether it was newspaper, in school, whatever. I thought that was important. Track and wrestling don't get much press. Football and basketball do. Back then, if you were a major sport, the paper took care of it. If you weren't, you were writing the articles. My wonderful wife, I loved to read. I hate to write. She was my editor-in-chief. made sure the punctuation was correct, the spelling was okay, and I think I did a fairly good job of supporting my athletes. Paul mentioned in our, not the scrapbooks, but stat books, he said, why aren't there pictures in these? And why are they in these? And I said, well, I took over from Mr. Schad this year, and I thought those needed to be in there. When I played, we never received stat books, anything like that. And I thought it was important for kids to get those because, like now, 30 years later, they have those. They can show their kids, and they can look back, these kids were my friends, or this is what our teams accomplished. And I'm very proud of this fact. Here at Little Miami, I helped a lot of alumni get started in coaching. I had 14 people work with me on the football program during my tenure. That's just high school. I didn't count junior high. And with wrestling, I had 16. And then I got helped people, some of them get into other schools and coach. There were another dozen. So I like to feel like I had a hand in turning out some other good coaches. Okay, two more things here. This will be kind of hopefully fun for people, some of the coaches here and teachers. But this is during my teaching career, lunch duties. 6,380 lunch duties in 35 years. Telling kids to pick stuff up off the floor, off the tables, and behave. Taking athletes home. Like I mentioned, a lot of times, a coach is kind of a surrogate parent a lot of times. Maybe kids are from single families and stuff. It's actually how I learned to drive around in this district. Learned my way around the school district. 1,000 trips plus. I took players to or from practice during my tenure. Now all the coaches will love this one. Bus trips to games. 600 plus trips in my 30-some years. And the final one, I coached over 1,900 kids. Here at Little Miami. So there's some interesting statistics. In closing, and I really feel this way. I hope I can get composed here. I don't know what my life would have been like if I wouldn't have been hired here at Little Miami in 77. 77. I met my wife here. It's my first job. I met so many wonderful parents, students, teachers. It's just hard for me to imagine what it would be like. After we were married, I told my wife we're gonna live in the district. Back at that time, it's not like it is now. There weren't any houses available to move into the district. It took us 2 years to look to find a house. And we moved in. Actually, I was Paul's neighbor for 9 years out on West Road. Because I wanted our kids, our children, to be where we taught. I thought it was important. I'm teaching and coaching all these other children, and I wanted those parents, those kids to know I thought this school was good enough for my kids to be here. And it was. They got an excellent education. I still, Matt sees me, I still attend a lot of events. especially football and wrestling. But like I said earlier, I started noticing. I wanted to see the track team last year. They were awesome. That was fun to watch. I have so many good memories of the guys I coached with, and I can't believe one of my best, I'll call him a friend, fellow coach, Randy Gray, still going. We had a great run when we were on varsity together while I was varsity coach. One last thing here. About 20 years ago, I was kind of in a downswing for just a year or two. I was approached by one of our neighboring schools by their head coach, and he asked me if I'd like to come over and be an assistant. And I didn't respond, and he shook his head. Said, "You still believe that green and gold?" And he was right. My last thing up here is I just want to thank everyone that supported me, my family, all the teams I've coached. And go Panthers. Have a good year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Coach. To all of you, thank you for allowing us to be part of your families. You're forever part of ours.